Hello and welcome to the training video for OOT, the Work Readiness Assessment Tool that I, Genevieve.cyrs, and Christine.haworth have developed, and we're happy to share this tool with all of you. We would like to kind of preview our training video by providing you a little bit of information about some of the materials that you'll probably become very familiar with and will help you actually administer the tool with your clients. So, without further ado, we have this lovely kit, which you should all be provided. This kit is a start-to-finish complete assessment tool. You have pens in here, even timers, and all of the resources that you will need. Within the kit, everything is actually really clearly labeled, so you can kind of see that different things have different shape codes or different labels to kind of help you easily go through the kit as you are using it with your clients. One of the key resources that you will actually be using is something called the Master Reader. That is sort of your main guide through using the tool. And it's actually right here in the tab called Reader. And basically, if you take that out and take a look at it, the outline of it looks like this. And what you have is on the left-hand side, kind of either right here it says Introduction to Mission, which is truly the first part of this assessment tool, which ends up playing out like a game. And then you also have on the left side each specific task labeled out with the name of the task, the shape that it's aligned with, according to the cards that you use with the youth, and the definition of each of those specific work readiness tasks. The things that you see printed just in regular print correspond to the cards that you'll be giving your clients. Again, in the kit, you have cards that all have different brightly colored shapes on them. See? And these are the cards that the youth will be going through to go through their mission, so to speak. On the card, you'll have specific text, and then that will actually align with what you have on your reader as well. Actually, this is the financial management task, and that is the first task on your reader. What you will note on the reader is that there are specific instructions for both the client and the administrator. The client, everything that they read will be in regular text, and then prompts for the administrator will be underlined. And that's to make it easy to remember what it is that you need to be prompting your client for or offering your client as you give the assessment. You will also note, if you flip the page, that all text in bold is actually a prompt for the client to enact the actual skill that the specific task is asking for, and that also different choices are outlined in italics. So we've really been consistent throughout the reader in trying to provide ease of use of the assessment tool for you and for the client. That being said, there's actually instructions that are a little bit maybe more detailed than I just provided for you in the complimentary assessment manual that we have lovingly put together for you all. If you actually open the manual, you'll end up with a table of contents, and then you'll end up with a list of the definitions of all of the skills that this particular tool evaluates. All of the skills are actually outlined in bold, so you can clearly reference them when you need them. And they're also on the reader, like I noted, in the left-hand column. And then if you flip open the manual just a little bit more, past all the definitions of the skills, you will have on one page the instructions on how to use the reader, so spelled out a little bit more in case you need an additional reference, and also above that, the grading criteria. We modeled how you would score an individual after kind of universal rehab scoring. So basically, if a client is able to do the task without any prompts from the administrator, that person would be ranked as someone who is independent in that task. Someone who required 1 to 3 prompts, or roughly 25% to 50% support in completing the task, that client would be rated as functional for that particular skill. And lastly, if the client required 4+ cues, verbal or visual, or required basically 75% or more support in order to complete the task, that would be scored as an area for growth. So we definitely emphasize that within this tool there are no right or wrong answers. What we want to note is how the client actually demonstrates the skill. And we do this through 11 discrete tasks and then lots of clinical observation. Next, we will move to part of the video where we will show you how you actually begin the assessment with the youth, and hope that you enjoy the video.
So this is OOT. It's a work readiness assessment tool, and basically the purpose of it is to determine which job readiness skills you're really great at and which ones you still might need to work on in order to be ready for a job. So the way we would do this previously was through a series of yes or no questions, a series of self-report, but now what we've done is developed an assessment tool where you get to go step by step in solving a mystery. You get to be a secret agent, and you get to go step by step in order to solve that mystery, and then each step of the way, you're demonstrating a different job readiness skill. So that could be problem solving, or communication, or conflict resolution, those types of skills. So instead of just reporting on whether or not you're good at those things, this actually gives you the opportunity to demonstrate your skill in that area. So after you explain a little bit of the process to your youth, you want to set up your environment. So the first thing you want to do is pull out your score sheet and have the side with the 3 grids facing up. And you'll want to pull out your reader so that you are ready to follow along and guide the youth through the different tasks. And you'll see this in the next clip, but you want to first start with the tagline, which looks like this. And then there's another smaller card also within the mission section that says your mission. So this is a little bit about the mission. So the first thing is the tagline. Something hairy is going on in San Francisco, and the mayor is nowhere to be found. Find the mustache clippers of San Francisco's mayor before the press finds out. So this is San Francisco's mayor. And then feel free to flip over that mission and read a little bit more. So who? You are a top secret agent. Where? San Francisco, California, United States. What?
A couple things to note as you actually give the assessment. One thing is that your different clients will be in different spaces. So as they go through the assessment, there will be opportunities for them to read cards or little blips, little quotes as they move through it. They have the option, of course, to read them out loud, to read them to themselves, for you to read it. We're really trying to meet the client where we're at, and ultimately how they go through the assessment and whether they read aloud or do not kind of informs you about what kind of learner they are or how they like to actually work in different environments.
So your mission: to track down the mayor's mustache clippers and return them to him. But be careful, he will not be happy if the media finds out. So, are you willing to accept your mission?
I am.
Good. So just a couple of things about this process. I will be taking notes throughout because I have a horrible memory and I won't remember anything if I don't write it down. Also, there are no right or wrong answers to these questions, so it's more about the process. And also, really exciting actually, you have a contact inside City Hall who will be giving you clues throughout. But don't put them together until the very end so that the press doesn't find out.
Okay.
Also, we wanted to point out another task that's actually woven through the entire assessment. So there are discrete tasks, which you'll score independently, and then there's one task that is actually woven throughout, and it is the impulse control task. So it ends up being almost the very last task that you'll go through. So if you flip to the very back of your reader, at the top it says impulse control. And what you'll notice is right here at the bottom it says give clue. And that's actually noted in several different tasks throughout. So it's also noted under financial management, give clue, judgment, time management, and also direction following. What that actually means is after the particular client finishes that task, what you'll do is give them a clue from the envelope marked with a half moon shape, marked by the half moon shaped tab envelope in your kit. You'll actually pull this out right when you begin the assessment, and every time it says give clue, you'll give them one of these particular ripped up pieces. This is actually an exercise in how to manage their impulses, as you definitely let them know in the very beginning after they read their mission that they are not to put the clues together as they move through their mission so that the press doesn't find out. And you can provide prompting to not reference or touch the clues as you go through the assessment, and that informs your scoring of impulse control overall. And it also just shows, it's also a way for them to solve the mystery. So this is actually how they end up completing their mission.
Okay, so here are all of the questions all of the tasks for the entire mission. So feel free to take them one at a time, and then we'll just go about it that way. So feel free to take the first one. And do you want to read it out loud, or do you want me to read it out loud?
I can read it.
Okay. So you'll notice at the beginning of that, I asked him if he wanted to read it aloud or if he wanted me to read it aloud. And we did that primarily for the purposes of this training video. Ideally, you want to also add the option of them reading it in their heads. But that would have been a very boring training video.
The mayor's press secretary gives you $50 as your budget for the day. You need to purchase a disguise for the mayor to wear so no one recognizes him leaving City Hall. But also realize you will need money for lunch and for transportation home later tonight. From the options provided, please choose a disguise, hat, and glasses, your lunch, and a method of transportation home.
Here are the options provided. And then also, here's some scrap paper and a pen if you'd like it. So, do you want to tell me about the choices you made?
Oh, alright. So I picked the sunglasses for, cover his eyes and his identity, along with a little top hat.
Mm-hmm.
It's It looked a little businessy, but it looked kind of weird a little bit, but it'll be fine. And pizza, because pizza is pretty inexpensive. And then for the bus later, that's pretty inexpensive as well. And yeah.
Okay, great. How much money did you spend?
This is 10, 34, so 44, 44 plus 48, no, 44 plus 48. Should be around 49 or 50, or at 50.
Okay, cool. So, what work skill do you think this was looking at?
I would say like maybe like critical thinking or like quick decisions or like decisiveness and like immediate or last minute times of like stress or something like that. I mean, quick decision making, I would say, and critical thinking.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a part of it. There's also money involved, right?
Mhm.
So, you
Oh,
could,
like budgeting and yeah.
exactly. So, how do you use budgeting in a job? Why is that an important skill to have in a job?
Because you never want to overspend or spend outside of your means.
And how do you feel you normally budget? How do you feel you are at the skill of budgeting?
I mean, I try to budget the best as I can.
Okay, great. And do you have long-term financial goals, short-term financial goals?
I don't really have any long-term financial goals yet, but I've been saving up for a while now, just to have some money, like for emergencies or anything like that.
In the beginning of this task, it's also a great idea to offer them the use of their phone. So if they typically use their phone as a calculator, it's great to be able to let them use that tool, because we're not testing whether or not they can add up numbers, we're testing whether or not they can budget using the tools that they have readily available. So if their phone is readily available, please allow them to utilize that during the test.
That would be an appropriate accommodation that they would do and still complete the task independently.
Exactly. And then also, what's a really important thing to note is that the choices that our young man chose were actually over $50. So they totaled $51.40. And you'll notice that in this video, I did not highlight that to him. I did not bring that to his attention. But when you're doing this, you'll be tempted sometimes to not hurt their feelings or to not bring these things to their attention for fear of
Upsetting them or kind of triggering maybe regular occurrences that they have where they're told that they're not doing something well.
So you'll be tempted to not correct them in the moment, but it's really important that you do so in a gentle way, in order to promote insight, in order to see how they respond to constructive criticism while on the job, as this is incredibly important once you're sending them to a workplace. And it also is a gentle test of emotional regulation skills. So when they're in a stressful situation where it's been brought to their attention that they haven't done something perfectly, how do they respond? What are their coping skills? And also, most importantly, in regards to this assessment, is that you aren't able to grade them on the skill unless you've provided them with prompting in order to bring them to the point where they're successfully completing the task. So as you remember from before, the tasks are graded based on how many prompts you provide the youth. So if you don't provide them with any prompts, then they receive an independent score. If you provide them with 1 to 3, then they're functional. And if you provide them with 4 or more prompts, then they would be in the area for growth category. So this young man, I didn't provide him any prompts once I realized that he went over. Therefore, we aren't able to grade him. We aren't able to say that, oh, with 1 prompt he would have been able to fix the error and then move on. Or we're not able to say maybe he just wouldn't have been able to add these things up and he would have been scored as an area for growth. And this also brings us into how to use the score sheet. So you'll see that on the score sheet, there is the first column with all of the shapes that correspond with the task cards. And then the second column is just a very narrow column. And what we do in that column is indicate whether the youth was independent, functional, or area for growth in that skill. And we do that in a variety of ways. Jen and I have different methods for doing it. So it really just depends on your preferences. We try to avoid the letters A, F, and I because those have connotations outside of their use in this assessment tool, but we'll do vertical lines, horizontal lines, diagonal lines. Sometimes I'll write min, mod, or max, or independent. So it really just depends on your comfort. But then next to that, you'll write notes based on their performance during that task. So you're not only writing down notes around how well they demonstrated, for example, in this task, their financial management skills, but you'll also be noting things that reflect on their abilities in the other areas that you're observing throughout this assessment. So, for example, in this during this task, I wrote down that he independently referenced prompts throughout. So he was reading the card and going back to it whenever he had a question about what to do next. So that was really positive. He also asked clarifying questions and he explained the rationale for his choices. He added when prompted, and then I wrote down that he miscalculated and went over budget. So these are just very tangible things that you've noticed throughout his performance on this task. And then with that information, you're able to grasp, you're able to gather more information on how you want to grade him for clarifying, for example, for generalization, for initiation, for direction following, things like that. So it's just really important to write down clear notes during this process so that you have a lot of information to refer back to once you're doing the actual grading. Also, you'll notice on the score sheet we have we've made it a little bit easier for you. So we have included the processing questions themselves. So after each task, you'll see that you ask a series of processing questions in order to see how the youth is able to apply this skill to the working world and to the requirements of work. And so these processing questions are written for your convenience on the score sheet, so you'll be able to reference them throughout.
Those processing questions are also noted in the very beginning on the first page of your reader as well. But we wanted to make them a little bit more easily accessible, especially when you're just starting to get to know and use the assessment.
Great job on that last one. Your secret contact has given you a clue, your first clue.
So, as you'll notice, Christine just gave our client a secret clue based on the fact that the client has a secret contact in City Hall that will be slipping him clues throughout the assessment. As explained earlier, this is actually part of the impulse control task that is interwoven throughout the assessment. So we have several discrete tasks, and impulse control is one of the only tasks that we actually specifically measure that is woven into various different tasks. What happened was Christine gave our client a clue from the envelope, which is noted by the half moon shape. You'll give them 4 clues throughout the assessment, followed by a 5th clue at the culmination of the task. Be careful when you are giving these clues. A couple things to note is that you want to actually hand the client the clue directly. I usually kind of slip the clue to the client, kind of adding a little bit of a playful element to it. And also you want to be mindful of delivering the assessment in a group setting, which does come up sometimes. We often deliver the assessment in groups of up to 3 participants, as we found that any more than that often gets very tricky in trying to observe multiple clients completing the tasks throughout. With a group setting, you will actually be doing a couple of things. In reference to impulse control, as we were just talking about, what you'll want to do is make sure that you have several envelopes kind of set aside in different places so that you're handing your clients clues from the same envelope. So your first client will get only clues from the first envelope, second client will only get clues from the second envelope, third client would only get clues from the third envelope. That is because each envelope has 5 clues total, and they all come together to form one whole, and if they get mixed up, they won't be able to solve the mystery, probably. The other thing to note when you are doing this assessment in a group setting is that you really want to allow different clients turns to answer questions first, to read the cards, and to just have their own space. You don't want to allow someone who is particularly social or gregarious to kind of overtake the assessment and always be the first to respond, and you definitely want to allow your quieter clients to really reveal what they know and what conclusions they are arriving at as they move through the assessment. So you definitely want to make sure that they each have their turn and space to speak.
So are you ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Feel free to go for it.
The mayor is too busy to meet with you in person right now. He wants to help as much as possible, though, so he left you an envelope full of information on the case. See an enclosed envelope, go through the evidence, and organize it into categories. Explain why you chose those categories.
Here is your envelope from the mayor.
So I organized these 3, the wife, the daughter, and the secretary, because they seem personal assets to the mayor.
Okay.
And so I organized them together, and then I organized these 3 because they all involve Matt Williams in some sort of shape or form.
Mm-hmm.
And then these 3 because they're all Clipper related.
Mm-hmm.
Schedules, purpose, food. Yeah. So 3 different categories.
Okay, great. What work skill do you think this one was looking at?
Organization skills.
Beautiful, exactly. So why do you think it's important to be able to organize when you're in a job?
It's just important to just be on top of everything in your work environment, especially in your duties. If you have responsibilities, it's important to prioritize and to make sure everything gets taken care of.
Yeah. So how well do you feel you organize?
I'm really not the best organizer, but I do try.
So it sounds like it's something you might want to work on.
Yeah.
A couple things to note based on what we just witnessed in terms of the triangle, aka the organization task. First of all, you'll note that as our client was completing the task, Christine was taking notes. This is actually really important as you move through the assessment as the administrator. You might be tempted at times to just simply interact with the client or take a break, but truly you want to be writing down as much objective observances as you are noting throughout the entire assessment. This will help you definitely to inform your scoring, and also when you're looking through your notes a couple days later in order to write the report, it will help you provide some really concrete and helpful strategies to support the youth in their endeavors. A couple things also to note about how this young person was scored for this task. As you'll note on the score sheet, a couple objective things that Christine wrote were that he actually had great generalization. So he was really able to talk about organization, not just in the context of this particular task, but also apply it to his life and work, which is really important. So you would note that in terms of a skill not directly tested in this particular task, but observable throughout the assessment. You'll also notice that he actually completed the task independently. He didn't require any prompts to actually finish the task and was able to articulate the rationale behind his organization. When Christine was actually asking the 4 processing questions with our client after they completed the task, you'll notice that the client definitely elaborated on things that he thought were particularly important. We want to be clear that although you definitely want to hit each of the 4 processing questions, you want this to be a fluid interaction. So it doesn't need to be so rigid or follow a script exactly when you're actually processing with the youth after each task. The important piece is that they are able to generalize, think about the task in terms of not only this context, but multiple contexts, and also reflect on whether or not they are good at this skill or it is something that they want to improve.
So you ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Feel free.
So you see your suspect jump into a car in a parking garage by City Hall. You start snapping photos, and as the car comes towards you, you jump out of the way just in time to see the license plate. Stash Stiller. Zoom by. You want to organize this new evidence for a meeting with your boss that starts in 2 minutes at her office. For your meeting, you have 2 minutes to draw a picture of your mode of transportation to the office, arrange the pictures in an order that you can present to your boss, write out a text to your boss explaining that you're on your way.
Perfect. So, the pictures to arrange are in here. And as far as the picture, you can draw it here and you can also write the text message here.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, perfect. This is a 2-minute timer. It's
Okay.
obviously not going to ding or anything. So, you're in charge.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
On here.
So, according to these pictures, try to organize them as best as I can. Probably wrong, but see a suspect getting in his car and then driving off. Got the license plate, and then it's an order, sequence of events. And the pictures are trying going to the office. Probably gonna take meetings, so I just drew a mini bus. And then I texted my boss that I have some evidence on the suspect. I'm on my way.
Beautiful. So, what job skill do you think this one was looking at?
I would say just like order of events, sequential planning.
Why do you think there was a timer in this one?
Because you're always on the clock on the job.
Were you paying attention to?
I kind of lost track of the a little bit, but
Yeah.
I kind of should have paid more attention to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what we were hoping to go for with this one was time management.
Time management. Yeah.
So there are 2 components to time management. There's monitoring your time and pacing yourself accordingly. So how well do you feel you manage your time?
Well, I'm definitely not the best at time management. I always I don't always lose track of time, but it's easy for me to, get carried away doing what I'm doing.
Is time management something that you want to work on?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Is that a definitely, or is that like the other ones where you're like, oh, well, we can always get better at everything else?
No, I'm not the best at time management, so yeah, it's definitely something I could work on.
Okay.
Also, you'll note that he didn't finish the task on time. So we would grade him as being in an area for growth for time management because he wasn't able to monitor his time and pace himself accordingly. That being said, there are oftentimes youth who will finish the task incredibly quickly without ever looking at the timer, and so they'll have a minute left over afterwards. And so although they're able to complete the task and therefore get a score of independent because they're able to complete everything within the given time, we want to put in the recommendations, just strategies to assist them in developing those skills of monitoring their time.
because they might come to a task or an activity or a demand of their work in which they aren't able to speed through it without pacing themselves accordingly. So you want to make sure that that information, those strategies are included within the assessment summary so that this youth is set up for success.
Congratulations, you've solved the mystery. You're still unsure about how the clippers arrive at the temple, but you know you'll get to the bottom of it one day. Either way, you need to get those clippers back to the mayor, so you rush out the door to go get them. From where you are now, plan out the fastest possible route to the hiding place. Please explain how and why you selected this route.
So, I have a map here for you that can help you figure out your route. How would you normally find out the route to a new place?
Use like the Google Maps or navigation on your phone or anything like that.
Okay. So in this situation, would you prefer to use the physical map or your phone?
Probably my phone, because it's faster.
Great. So how would we get there?
Probably just take Muni, just take the bus. Take about 36 minutes from here. Just take the 24.
You'll notice that I had him not only find the directions on his phone, but then explain to me what he would do step by step. This is important because sometimes they're able to access that information on their phone, but then not actually follow through with the directions. So you want to make sure that they can demonstrate to you that they know what to do first, second, third, in order to arrive at their destination. So you'll notice in this task that I offered both the map and the phone as options for navigation, because again, we're not testing them on how well they read a map, we're testing them on how well they're able to get around the community. So any tool that they have readily available, we want them to be able to use. Great, thank you so much for participating.
Of course.
So now what we have is a certificate.
So now the youth has completed the assessment, and it's time for the closing processing activity, which is the certificate of completion, which Christine just handed our client. Back to the assessment kit. As always, there is a folder marked certificate, and you will take some pre-printed certificates out of the assessment kit. There's a space to indicate what the assessment showed the particular youth that they're very good at, and there's also a space to indicate something that they learned through the assessment that they would like to work on. You will kind of be able to tell a little bit about the youth's insight into their own skills and what they learned through the assessment based on how readily they are able to identify what they're good at and actually what they would like to work on. Then, of course, we would like to note what the goal is. So this insight that they developed was that in order to help them better prepare for an interview, was it better able to help them prepare to speak to a particular employer about what they're good at or what they want to work on. There's a variety of different goals that the youth can present with. And then, of course, you sign their name and your own at the bottom. So now you've probably scored the entire assessment. So based on all your interactions with the youth, going through all of the different cards from start to completion, you've made notes on your score sheet and you've processed through everything. These notes are really important because probably right when you're finished and maybe you've driven your youth home or they've left whatever space you two are working in, you want to actually turn that score sheet over to view the observation form. This is a much more complete list of all of the skills that you actually observed during the assessment. So not only will you be transferring the 11 discrete skills that were actually evaluated through tasks, but all of the other skills as well. Some of these skills that we touched on are generalization, emotional regulation, and insight, among others. Based on the definition, which you can reference in the manual, you will score each youth based on area for growth, functional, and independent, and put in any notes that you would like to kind of trigger your memory, maybe strategies that you thought of that you would like to implement with the youth that you want to work on in the future, or maybe just those objective observations that you noted during assessment.
And once you complete the observation form, you'll want to transfer that information, well, once you have time, to the assessment summary. So that's the official document that we use to report all of the information from the assessment to the providers that these youth are working with. So in the world that we work within, we generally provide this information to the probation officer, to their teachers, to their case managers, to anyone who's working with this youth very closely, as well as their work supervisors or any people who are overseeing their job readiness training programs. So it really just depends on which environment this youth is existing within and who you think would benefit from this additional information. But just recognize that you can give this to a variety of people and they will find it helpful in their interactions with the youth. So when you're transferring the information from the observation form to the assessment summary, you'll see that you put, initially you put the information in a grid. So that grid is just a snapshot of how the youth performs in these various skills. A thing to note is that if there are certain skills that you didn't assess or observe enough in order to assess, then you can just take those completely out of the graph. So things like coping skills or emotional regulation, you're not always observing these skills, so you can just remove them from the graph when giving the final report to your providers. So within the chart, you'll see that what you generally put is objective information about the youth's performance in that skill. So that will include information as to why they were scored in that way. An example of this could be, for generalization, great at connecting specific skills to their application in the workplace. With time management, you'll note something along the lines of has some difficulties monitoring and pacing his time accordingly. And then right next to that information, you'll put C1 or C2, and that corresponds directly to the number of the recommendation that applies to that's beneath the chart. So these recommendations, you'll find a lot of sample versions in the manual that we've put out. And also you'll want to note that these are wonderful sample recommendations, but you will also want to modify them slightly to meet the specific needs of your client. The example that we have here for time management is offer time-sensitive activities that require him to monitor his own time, verbally reinforcing successful time-sensitive task completion. So this is actually directly from the manual and directly applicable to this young man. You can add in things that are more specific to the type of job that he'll be doing or specific to the setting in which he'll be working. And those nuances are generally very helpful when the providers are receiving this information.
In addition to the recommendations that are already on the manual, we definitely encourage you to write up your own strategies as well. That's actually what we've been doing for the last couple of years, which has actually informed the manual. We trust that you are the clinician and that you know your client, especially through the observation and interaction that you had during the assessment. Okay, so that concludes our training video on the OOT assessment.
Thank you so much for watching, and we wish you the very best of luck in enjoying this wonderfully fun and informative tool.
Yes, and do not hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. Our contact information is listed at the very beginning of this training video and at the very end, so you have multiple places to reference how to get a hold of us. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you so much.